Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on how technology is changing and opening many opportunities in the education sector. This webinar is presented to you by India's leading LMS provider, Edufront, in association with TechGig. This is the second webinar that we're hosting today. The first one, which we hosted in January, talked about the role of EdTech in education continuity, especially in the COVID-19 times. Today, we're taking a step ahead and we're talking about hybrid learning among the COVID-19 times and what its shape could be as we open up our school premises post-COVID. COVID-19 has been a tough time for all of us. Who would have thought that all students, ranging from little toddlers to college students, would be learning from home, would be conducting simple science experiments from home, or would be maybe, reading out Shakespeare to their teachers over a smartphone, over a laptop, over a tablet. But education continuity happened, all thanks to the multifarious efforts of teachers, educationists, academicians, parents, and most importantly, students who switched quickly to the online mode for education continuity. Today, we are going to talk of many assets of hybrid learning. And for that, I have curated a very eminent panel comprising of edtechpreneur, academicians, mentor, and a school leader. But before I talk to my panelists, I would warmly welcome 80,000 people who are watching this live on TechGig and 2,500 plus principals and academicians who signed up to be a part of this webinar. Welcome, everybody, and I'll quickly introduce my panel to you. I have with me Mr. Satish Jha. So quickly say hi to our audience.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, sir. He is the chairman for Edufront. He's also the committee co-chair for TIE Edu-SIG. He's the chairman for ReachScale, founder of OLPC India Foundation, and he's the former editor of Dinaman and the Times of India Group. Welcome, sir. I have with me Dr. Shayama Chona. Ma'am, quickly wave to our audience, please. Namaskar, ma'am. She's the founder of Tamana Association, and she's also the former principal of the reputed Delhi Public School from Puram. I have with me Jyoti Arora. Welcome, ma'am. Please wave to our audience. Namaskar, ma'am. She's the principal of Mount Abu Public School from Delhi, and she's also the governing body member of CBSE. I have with me Mr. Shantanu Jha. Hello, sir. Please wave to our audience. He's the co-founder of Edufront, and he's the CTO of Vahan AI and CIO of Beaconsfield Capital Management. And I would quickly take the discussion forward, and I'll probably first speak to Mr. Satish Jha about hybrid learning, which is a mix of in-person learning and the online instruction. It was always there in the West, and a lot of India's privileged and frontline schools had it. But now with COVID-19, all of us had a taste of how technology can actually open new realms of learning and education continuity. So what could be the new framework of hybrid learning post-COVID?
Thank you, Itaji. It's good to know that hybrid learning has become something between technology and in person. But in some ways, learning is a very complex process, which we always go on, experiencing. And in classroom, in homes, in playgrounds, in libraries, so it was always hybrid in that sense. So now it's technology versus in person. If you take that perspective, then over the years, technology has been aiding learning process, and its quotient or its component is going up as we bring in. In fact, learning at one time, can you imagine that even Blackboard was a technology?
Yeah, so, probably. Yes.
Exactly. So what happens is that anything that helps us the way we work, that is a piece of technology. And since a lot of developments have happened in the field of information technology and computers and systems which have been evolving, they have been contributing more and more to the way we learn and process what we are taught and how we get educated, how we take what we learn to the next level of working with it, and so on and so forth. So I think as we become, our skills change, the way we personalize learning, that capability is going to improve. For instance, If you have a blackboard and a classroom of, say, 25 students, a teacher cannot speak to every student individually. It's a
Right.
broadcast from teaching students. But now, as we evolve in learning how to connect with every student individually, in fact, when I was looking at one laptop per child in 2007-8, the MIT project, what we could do at that point in time was a teacher in a classroom of 25 could send 25 separate questions to 25 students at the same time. Now, that was possible because technology was such. Students could talk to each other without disturbing anybody on chat mode and so on and so forth. They could experience the way they were learning about the same concept being spoken about. So it was evolving. And I think as we become very good with it, we will see how technologies aid personalized learning, which means how a child or learner sees, or even a teacher for that matter, because we're all constant learners, no matter what our experiences are new every day, every moment. And that changes the way we look at everything. In that sense, we're all learners. When you talk about formal, structured school education, now education is structured, but learning is not. Learning is individual. Education curriculum is designed by institutions, but the learning, same curriculum, same teachers help students learn differently. Every child learns differently because the way they are wired, the way they connect the dots, the way they
Right.
figure it out, and it's all about that. So I think the movement is going to be towards personalized learning in a way the teacher-student relationship becomes a little more engaged and it's not just a broadcast, but one-on-one. As of today, teachers do not have the capacity without technology to deal with everyone. They have their preferences, they look at students' talent, they have their own capabilities, they process the information as best as they can, and they connect with them depending on the capabilities. Now, a technology is making it possible for them to do it differently. What it does is not only that I do it, but I can also record it, I can also document it. I'm able to see over a period of time. There's a longitudinal sense of progress that we can understand. And from there, we can see how we can help the student learn better, or how we can challenge the student to do better than what they have already achieved, and so on and so forth. So I think basically technology not only democratizes, it also makes it possible for every child or learner or teacher for that matter to become more capable of handling the complexity that's hitting us all the time. Because one thing we can't forget, every year, every 2 years, we are actually creating as much information as in the preceding part of the entire history. So to deal with that, we will need technologies. So I think technology will have a couple of functions. One of them is to help us deal with the current emerging complexity of information on the one hand, and on the
Mhm.
other, make every individual learner, and learner primarily, student and teachers both alike, more capable of handling that. That's the way I see it.
I think the second point is far more interesting, and I would really wait for that time to come, sir. And I'll quickly move to Ma'am Shama Chona now. Ma'am, you had an illustrious career in teaching, and you've mentored school and institutes. So, as far as I know, hybrid learning was earlier seen like a foreign concept. It's something that's popular abroad because they have connectivity, they have infra. And come 2020 and come COVID, everybody in India is learning on a laptop, on a smartphone, on a tablet, or maybe sometimes neighbors, learning together on a shared screen or something. So how do you think that, in a conventional Indian setup, the hybrid learning is going to evolve and be more accepted and adapted well?
Hello, young minds. I feel I can call you all my dear young minds for the simple
Of course.
reason that I started my teaching in the year of 1964. From
Okay.
1964 to today, while I still teach, I suddenly realized that 2020 has done to the education front something so revolutionary that could not have happened otherwise. Of course,
Otherwise.
tough year, but it has also found new opportunities. And the most important being, every teacher today has to be technology literate. One had
Right.
never expected that the teachers would come up to the standard of the requirement of learners since they were so occupied in the system of the classroom. Now, first the computers moved from the computer labs to the classrooms, and now classrooms have moved to the homes. And it is essentially hybrid learning. Kids are learning on gadgets, devices, which one had never thought of. You know, in the olden times, all we thought was IQ, intelligence quotient, and PQ, physical quotient, and SQ, social quotient, EQ, emotional
Motion
quotient. But
quotient.
today we think about TQ. TQ is the technological quotient. Today, the
Right.
kids are born with technology wired into their brains. And I do realize that the future of India, the future of the educational world, lies in the hands of technology. We started the hybrid learning with smart classrooms by Shantanu Prakash, if you remember, Educom. And then we realized that there was more from it. There was more for the teachers to contribute to. And now, essentially, books are really out of the window. And I do hope that the CBSE will also appreciate that it's not rote learning that matters. What matters is how well the kids can learn from other sources. And
Right.
teacher is there, but the teacher is also there to be able to cope up with hybrid learning, make the classes interesting, bring in more videos, bring in more stories. In fact, the other day I was attending a class from a foreign university, and early morning I heard my granddaughter loud piano in her room. And when I entered, it was a class teacher who was playing the piano from the US university. And that was the breaking point, because the students have to find these classes very interesting, very interactive, not just text oriented. So I fully agree with Mr. Jha that learning takes place best when kids enjoy what they learn, and they can enjoy most when they do not have textbooks or that essential material which is a must for examinations. We are looking at learning outside examinations. We are looking at learning to be lifelong. We are looking at learning to be essentially self-disciplined, self-desired, self-organized, and wanting. I do believe that in-person teaching is very important. We need classrooms, we need schools also for physical education and for social interaction and social quotient. But technology, along with all of that, is the key to the learner's success and joy. I hope I've been able to answer your question. The future lies in technology.
Great. With that, I would quickly like to maybe pull in Mr. Shantanu Jha here, since he is the representative from the edtech world here. So hybrid learning was largely seen as an assistive technology to whatever the teacher is teaching in the class. From that model, it has come to a point where both teacher has to be in sync with what's playing on the screen, and rather teacher has to be prepared with what's coming on the screen next. So, what's your take on this, on technology leading learning, or learning or going side by side, hand in hand with teaching? So, what is happening right now? Please decode this entire scenario for us.
Sure, and I think it's a great question. So I'd say at the first level, I think we've already briefly touched on the fact the movement overall is towards more personalization. I think in that really means that technology is taking more and more of the lead, and I think that's come out in everything the previous two panelists have said. That at one level, that's simply about the distribution of content and the availability of really excellent learning content.
Right.
But at another level, it's also about the development of technologies that are able to encode pedagogical standards, right? For example, personalization no longer just means the teacher is able to give extra attention to the student. Personalization can also mean we have more sophisticated artificial intelligence systems that can figure out what a student isn't doing well and not merely flag it to the teacher, but has enough contextual understanding to actually give that student the relevant kind of content they need to rectify their lack of understanding. That
Right.
is relatively common already in mathematics, where it's very easy to do, especially when we're talking about lower level mathematics like arithmetic. But I think when we get to substantially more complex subjects where there's no obvious right answer, there may be easily referenceable facts, but you're looking for a broader contextual understanding, the ability to learn or meta learn in a subject like English or history or Sanskrit. We're gradually developing systems that are able to have that same personalized approach in that context. And I think that's a huge quantum leap that's not sufficiently appreciated. Because once those systems are able to function at an adequate level, and once we're able to build out the infrastructure to take this even to the villages where no one has any of these devices, and I think it's a point we should all keep in mind that lots of students don't have any devices or internet access, and we have to wonder how their schooling is proceeding at all. That's probably at least 50% of Indian students. But the point being that if we are able to get that infrastructure to them, and we do have these AI systems, then we're quickly coming to a point where we really can equalize the gap, right, that exists in terms of resources between an upper middle class family in a tier 1 city and someone in a village of 1,000 people. Of course, at Edufront, that's been our primary focus, developing precisely those kinds of AI systems to solve exactly that problem. But I think, broadly speaking, these personalized learning systems where the AI takes on more and more of the teacher's burden, that's the overall trend, regardless of which demographic you're looking at.
Right. Right. I think, you've spoken about a lot of interesting aspects. The most interesting one to me seems where AI is able to help children who are living in far-flung locations or who come from underpowered societies and families, because that's really where some seepage and some initiatives need to be taken. So while we're speaking of all of this, let me quickly pull in this a school leader. I'd like to have Ma'am Jyoti Arora here. I'd like to understand how hybrid learning is being perceived in the schools, especially now that we are opening for schools after for beyond COVID learning. And if you could spare maybe 1 or 2 minutes and share some feedback of from parents, and what do the patrons and the guardians really have to say, that would be a real take on the situation.
Thank you.
Hello.
We lost your voice, Jyoti ji.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, yes, ma'am, we can hear you now.
Greetings to everyone, I said, and we understand with this sudden announcement of lockdown, the biggest question mark as a school leader was how to continue with the learning of students at different stages, at different levels they are into, especially those who have not even stepped into the education system, talking about the preschool and the board classes learners. So learning was the only solution to handle the situation, and hybrid learning, as we understand, is a way of combining traditional classroom experiences and experiential learning objectives and digital delivery. At one side, we have been talking a lot about 21st century learners. We have been addressing 21st century learners' needs, requirements. And if we have to look at the recommendations of NEP, which talks very high about developing of 21st century skills. And when we really need to understand that what kind of learners do we need to have. We really need learners, those who are, or the citizens to the country. So we need learners, those who are globally competent, well equipped with all the skills, and they are able to manage the knowledge. Lots of knowledge is floating everywhere. It's very important for a learner to understand and to choose in a very intelligent way, and they should be ready for the future jobs as well. So technology is one such savior which is very, very important. It is all about understanding the needs of specific group of learners we have, because when we talk about school education, we are catering to K-12 age. So,
Right.
when I look at the school education, I feel that one of the great benefits of the technological bloom that has happened across all these sectors is the development of digital learning and training solutions for every student in phased manner. So hybrid learning, to my opinion, evolved to provide multi-dimensional experience to the learners instead of just being restricted to flow of information from the teacher to the student, which was happening
Right.
in a normal classroom situation. And this young generation, as I said before, they are the 21st century learners. They being more aware and demanding is never content with the traditional way of teaching because they want to know a lot. They and On the other side, we see them competing at the global level, and the concept of globalization in our country has also opened up the boundaries to become a part of global vision. They want to know more what is happening in the world. They don't just want to restrict to the country, knowing about the country. So extensive and a very long learning from home during this, especially during this COVID time, when teachers adopted, the schools adopted the hybrid learning system, and the learning which happened from home resulted in engaged and immersive learners and made learning effective, and will definitely have long lasting retention too, to my understanding. Our school, being a Microsoft Showcase school, was not having that much problem for this during this paradigm shift which happened all sudden with the announcement of the lockdown. But teachers have played a tremendous role in adapting the technology and taking it to the students. And technology came as a big savior. It was a big question mark in front of all school leaders with this announcement of lockdown, that what will happen and how will we continue with the learning, because it was very uncertain that when are we going to reopen. We had never even thought of that 11 months will go on like this and we will not be able to come back to our in-person teaching style, which usually happens in traditional classroom. So the kind of learning environment, if you look at the kind of learning environment we need to create for our learners, wherein we talk about the factor of joyfulness. We want them to be developed as holistic learners. And I was talking about the recommendations of NEP when it says that it should be integrated learning, it should be project-based learning, it should be engaging, so that children are engaged in doing and learning, and it should be discussion-based learning. I think hybrid learning has created that kind of opportunity, wherein the variety of learners we are catering to in a school were able to understand and to get that opportunity. As an educationist, I think our biggest responsibility is to create a variety of opportunities or platforms for our variety of learners we have. And
Right.
hybrid learning was one such platform which was catering to the requirement of all sort of learners during this time. So I see a very bright future of hybrid learning now. When the government has announced reopening of schools for 9, 10, 11 and 12, I see only 50% students coming and attending the offline classes, because they have gone used to of online classes, and they are feeling that online mode of classes was somehow better as per theory part is concerned. So it has
All
also
right.
allowed the instructor to add to the traditional classroom experience by incorporating present day technologies and resources. They are learning lots of through online trainings, through variety of platforms available online. Teachers have also gained a lot as far technology is concerned. So the best of this is the learners, they are able to enjoy the best of both the world, comprising of flexibility of online classes and sport and interaction with the teachers and classmates. I think this has provided them a new way of new style of learning, I would say. So I would say that this came as a rescue of introvert students as well. They were not able to
Thank you. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank
classroom
you, ma'am.
situation.
I think your viewpoint was pretty elaborate, and it actually gave us an insight into how learning was actually happening and how teachers and students are actually going maybe extending their tech capabilities to sort of grasp onto learning. So while we're speaking to all of this, let me tell you, I have a lot of a heap of questions being typed out by all our audience here pertaining to hybrid learning and national education policy and all of that. I'll try to sift some of the pertinent questions for our speakers here. And while I do that, I'd like to get back to Mr. Satish Jha and maybe talk about the next stage to hybrid learning, especially in a country where economic barriers and societal barriers are prevalent. So hybrid learning has, like ma'am has just said, that hybrid learning has been adapted well. It's made its space in the education sector. So what's next? What's the next stage of hybrid learning?
Well, that is an opportunity that we have. How we combine technologies that become available to us to chart a path for our citizens for the future. I mean, very often we forget that people are the essence of a nation. People are the wealth of the nation. People are the ones who create the wealth. And the way we connect with each other depends on the kind of education we give them, the kind of learning environment we create. And if you keep that in mind, today, the way the films project, and that helps people understand that from a film like Chippa, to a film like Three Idiots, you can see a whole range of learning that goes on from the totally underprivileged, someone who doesn't have a home, who sleeps on the street side, to someone who are privileged, those who can talk about expensive shoes and kind of clothes they wear and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of range we're looking at. My sense is about 4 to 5% of India is learning with technologies, and they are experiencing it differently. Some of them are experiencing it as well as people do it in America or Europe, but they're fluent. My son began learning how to use Mario when he was 3 years old, and he could do it better than I could do. And since then, I've been defeated in every technology game by them. So children are ahead of us all the time. They're close to the future. They understand that. Question is, our policy planners, they grew up in a very different world. They don't understand how children are learning. So any policy you create, call it national education policy, call it global education policy, way behind where children can learn and understand. Policy planners live in an age when they grew up learning. They are always 30 to 40 years behind. And that's what challenge is. Their goodwill will not make children understand or learn better. So ultimately, what will happen is, just like our national industrial policy. Until 1990, we were thinking in a certain way. Overnight, our thinking changed, and things began changing. And I used to say often, India's progress hasn't happened because government decided so. It happened because all of us became participant in that, and entrepreneurs came forward. Similarly, in the case of education, every environment will create its own solutions. I'm hoping remote villages where children learn, they will find a solution in the context of their lifestyle, their deprivation, their challenges. That will create one solution. Those who are affluent, they'll create different solution. All across, you'll find a whole range of solutions emerging. Except the challenge I have is this: the technologies are not created by users alone. They're being created as 6, 7, 8 generations ahead, thinking ahead of that time. For instance, we can say that using an iPhone, I've become technology savvy. But imagine who created the iPhone. How did iPhone began happening? We imagined it. So those who imagine how to create iPhone, they are 5, 6, 7 generations ahead of that. What we are talking about is, how do we experience technology? Development of experiential technology is very critical because from that is context related. And that's where we have to work very, very hard. And as a nation, as everyone, as a teacher, as a school, as a student, and everyone will contribute. The question is, how do we see that? How do we absorb that? How do you connect the dots? How do you create the next generation solution to that? I'll take you back the way technologies develop and the way they get used. For instance, few of us remember that the fax was created sometime in the 1910 to 15 time range in Japan. The capability existed, but the first time it was used by America in 1984. So there was about almost 70 years gap. So when I was working with the pharmaceutical industry as a global head of technology, I learned one thing. The technologies that we use today, they were in the labs 30, 40 years ago. So we have to begin to understand what all is happening at the level of development of technologies. So, because our goal is not just help children use what is thrown at us by the market forces. To be ahead, we have to think in terms of what is happening in the world, what is being thought about, what is being constructed in the minds of the thinkers of technology and those who are tinkering with it, and how do we get ahead 4, 5, 6 generations? Because no matter what we achieve today, we'll still be 5, 6 generations behind the global curve. As a nation, I would urge that we should think in terms of getting the leadership to young people in these areas and getting them to imagine how things will happen 20 years now, because the children we begin teaching today, they'll be ready for the world 20 years or 15 years from now. So we begin thinking that way. How will the world look in 2035 for those who enter schooling today? If you're thinking of only this year, we'll be short term, we'll have a shorter vision, probably will not be able to utilize the opportunity that faces us. So my recommendation would be we have the diversity of economic challenges. We have diversity of various kinds, one of the most diverse nations on the planet. And we have to begin thinking about how to leverage that diversity to do better for the whole mankind. And if you begin thinking along those lines, this is the opportunity, because it's become possible given the technologies we have. But we have to reorient our own thinking, I would say. Thank you.
I particularly liked your last point where you said that, instead of having a short-term vision, we really need to think of things differently and probably have a long-term and a better prepared future kind of a vision for us. I'd like to maybe get back to Ma'am Shayama Chona and talk about a different aspect of hybrid learning, which is a blended learning. I'd like to know your views on looking at blended learning beyond COVID-19, because we have already aced hybrid learning in some sorts. Every school and every student has tasted it in this lockdown. So let's talk about the next segment, the blended learning. Hello, ma'am. Hello. Okay, cool. We'll quickly get back to ma'am. I think she's having some problems with her audio. And while she fixes that.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely. We were talking to you about blended learning.
So now it's very difficult to be able to differentiate between blended learning and hybrid learning, because at the end, they may be parallel, but in person is different from hybrid and blended. The fact that really bothers me today is that we used to have a class distinction between haves and have-nots, but now there's another kind of have-nots which do not have the devices. Now, the trouble is that those who do not have the devices, and when we are looking at our, budget of this year, we are really worried how we will be able to introduce this, as Mr. Jha expressed, in the far-flung areas, because we do not wish to have half the world of this nation suffer and the other half take over. So that's my first worry about blended or hybrid learning. The second thing is that the potential of variations are innumerable. And as our chairman just said, that we should make our children our gurus. The teachers are very they feel that they are, they know more than the students. But I have always had an opposite theory that the students sometimes know more than even us. So we should allow the kid of the 21st century to be an adult and lead us. And once we're ready to understand his thinking, if we are ready to give enough energy to his thinking, like the tinkering labs, I think it will make a world of difference. But I'm sure this blended learning is here to stay. In person is very necessary, but there are so many variations the world over. There are some who have, their own way of working, but they meet in small numbers. The teacher have one-to-one discussion, and they can actually fulfill their thoughts and views with the, leading points, etc. But the fact still remains and worries me is that technology, how it should reach the villagers. I think technology is also the only answer to their lack of good teachers, lack of, schools where they can have the technology. But if there are centers where they have the devices where the children can come, and then if those are well recorded and they have lots of options there and they're taught, then that is the future of this nation. We cannot have a divide. We have to have everybody online. And if that be so, then we as a nation, as every responsible citizen, the government, they have to think about those who do not have this facility.
Right. Very well spoken, ma'am. And it's almost like, you've almost shared a lot of pointers for Shantanu Jha to comment on, because it's the technology, it's the edtechpreneurs, and it's the edtech world who's preparing a lot of these solutions who can help us in situations like this and close in on this gap. Shantanu, please, can we have a take on this?
Sure, absolutely. I think I couldn't agree more with almost every point Dr. Chona has brought up. And that's exactly why we created Edufront, in part to solve the infrastructure problems, right? That, again, at least 50% of Indian students, probably substantially more than that, simply don't have access to the relevant devices so that they can participate in a blended or hybrid or otherwise technologically enabled learning model. Apart from getting the devices out there, I think that there are other perhaps deeper issues that technology is uniquely suited to speak to. For example, there was a famous communications theorist named Walter J. Ong. He said that there's a profound difference between oral and literate cultures, right? And I think in India, we still have a lot of features of oral cultures, right? Elders are very, very important. Things have to be repeated and memorized over and over. That's something from an oral culture, right, that we have even encoded in things like CBSE in an attempt to become a more literate culture, where the focus is on allowing people to create their own abstractions, right? Take their experience and reduce it to a set of principles that can be applied to other situations. In that context, I think when we're talking about students in villages, we're talking about people who've grown up in an almost exclusively oral culture. Technology is probably the easiest way to transition them into something more of a literate principles, abstraction-based approach to learning, this whole idea of meta learning. I think at the software layer, that means a few things that need to be attended to. And I think one of the biggest things, which no one thinks about, is unique forms of content for people at that unique inflection point between being in a very traditional oral culture and being in a more literate, industrialized culture. I don't think anybody has really attacked this issue the way it needs to be, spoken to, really. Simply having the AI is one thing, right? But as I think Satish pointed out, right, those people in those villages have a completely different life context, right? They need content that actually speaks to that, right? Rather than something that simply comes purely from the top down. And I think on what we'd like to do, right, is, in addition to giving the technological infrastructure, give uniquely suited content and a uniquely suited way of learning, right? Something between orality and literacy when it comes to interacting with the teacher and interacting with the software itself. So I think, again, the problems when it comes to just hybrid learning and blended learning is not just about technology, but styles of learning themselves and how technology can speak to that issue.
Okay, great. I would also like to take Ma'am Jyoti's view here on, as a school leader, as a educator, what's her take on hybrid learning and blended learning becoming a very prominent trend at schools?
I'm completely of the opinion, as Dr. Shayama Chona said, that both looks now similar and blended with each other. Blended learning also uses technology and combined with the aspects of the traditional classroom. And the idea is to promote an enriching learning experience for the kids and with their abilities and aptitudes. That is what blended learning is a viable model for the future of education, to my understanding. The in-person and online components can be combined and in any proportion, and each student finds a unique blend of the two that suits their unique At the same time, I'm in a strong opinion that learning should be taken care of all the. Am I there?
Yes, yes, of course, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So, learning equal opportunity should be provided for the learners, whether they are in the cities or in the deep rural area. Because when we look at the learning gaps which happened during this lockdown period, when city schools and city children could immediately shift over to online way of learning, the children in the deep rural area of the country, they are still deprived of, either because of unavailability of gadgets or unavailability of awareness or unavailability of internet facilities and all that. So no doubt learning is going to be very different now onwards, and blended learning mode will stay there, to my opinion, in a variety of forms. And there will be some teachers who will be teaching students online from home, the way it is happening these days. Though we have
Okay.
announced that school is open for these classes, but still some of them are not coming and they are learning from home. And teachers are able to make a learning environment through this blended learning, blended form of learning. And uh, the major concern, because when we started with this form of learning, parents had issues, children had issues, teachers had issues. But with lots of orientation trainings and hands-on activities, they could get into this experience. Now I think with the period of 11, 10 months or 11 months, they have gone too much flexible with this way of learning, that where after the reopening of the school, they feel like sitting at home and they are comfortable with this form of learning. So some of the parents, they are appreciating, they are okay with this way of having a learn in this way of style of their children's learning. And some of them are, of course, very happy with this opening of the school, and they wish that the children should go and they should be in person with the teacher for their doubt clearings, for hands-on activities, for practicals, for projects. Because again, I would like to remind that whether we talk about NEP, the last NEP or the latest NEP 2020, the entire focus is to have holistic learners with the because their needs are diverse. And we when we talk about that, there should be skillful learners. So when we talk about skills, and when we talk about the future, maybe after 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we need to understand their needs. And the need is technology. Whether we are in the city schools or we are in the rural area, the government should definitely, government is doing a lot, and maybe government has to do a more for children, those who are deprived of learning, deprived of hybrid learning or blended learning. You may use any term here. The idea is learning should go or should reach to every kind of child we have in our country.
Right. Yes, Dr. Chora, you had a point there. Ma'am, I think you're on mute. Unmute, please. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I wanted to take the discussion to another level, and that is the education of the disabled, or as the Prime Minister calls them, the Divyang. You will be so happy to know that those who were attending special schools or classes in regular schools but with special needs, have done very well with technology during this year, because they received the kind of, they love uh, uh, they love holding a phone in their hand. And the moment they got a mobile, and the moment they got an image which they could control, they realized that they're the masters of the game. And the
Right.
few hundred children that I'm looking after, the reports have been very, very good. We've been able to do physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. We've been able to do a whole lot of music, dance, and other vocational study technologies as well with them. So we haven't really thought about the 15% of that, uh, population, which has gained suddenly from the COVID-19 2020. A revolutionary change has been seen in special education and therapeutic intervention.
Right. I think that's a pertinent point. Yes, you had something to add here.
I was thinking of, we have to also accept the one thing, that the biggest divide that we face in the country is the fact that almost 80% children do not have a device of their own. And as a policy matter, I would request, I'll urge the government and everyone, each one of us, to tell the government it's very important that we hand over a device to the children, because they are the ones who will make maximum use of it. I'll give you an example. In 1988, the Dutch government decided they were behind in technology use, and they decided every single family will be sent a packet of tulip computers they were making, and they just sent them free of cost to every family. The idea was, even if 10% are going to open it, 15% open it and learn with it, they're going to get ready for tomorrow. And it so happened they got very good at doing whatever they were doing, and Holland became a different kind of country over the period of the next decade, and so on and so forth. Similarly, one thing the government can do today, if it decides to give all 300 million children tablets, maybe 10 million can afford it, maybe 20 can afford it, but 280 million can't afford it, and give them that in the next 1 or 2 years, that's the biggest and probably the best investment they will ever make in the entire history of India's 73 years. Because not giving them is creating opportunity gap. That keeps their productivity down. That keeps India $2,000 per capita income and lower. Just to give a reference point, India's diaspora is less than 50 million people strong. They make as much money as India's entire 140 crore people make. Effectively, 5 crore Indians overseas, they make as much in terms of generating value as 140 crores because of the level of education they have. We can bridge that. So that opportunity gap can be handled first by giving them a laptop or tablet or whatever screen they need. If you don't have, whatever we are talking is meaningless. It's meaningful only for 5% in India, 95% again will be left behind. Let's address this question of a digital divide, which has been on with us for 25 to 30 years. And we can do that today. We have resources. All we need is a resolve. And NEP doesn't address that. I wish it did.
Right.
So let's look at that, because otherwise everything we are talking just doesn't make sense. It only makes sense for those who have that screen. So screen is the window to the world. If we understand that and let every child have that screen, I think we would have made some realistic progress. Without that, our conversations are theoretical. That'll be my submission to all of us. Maybe, we all have different views, but that's good. Good to have different views. But at least let's have a conversation about it. Thank you.
Right. I think quite a point made here, sir. And like I said, there are a lot of questions pouring in, and you pertinently pointed to National Education Policy, NEP. I have a lot of questions around it. Let me take it to Dr. Shayama Chona. I have two questions from Shubhra Verma and Monica Chopra. Both of them almost have the same set of questions. How do we go ahead with hybrid teaching once the NEP is implemented? Basically, the role of NEP in hybrid learning. Dr. Chora, that's a question for you.
NEP, there is a very, very idealistic principle that have been, formed and presented. Like all education policies before that, they were excellent, but implementation is the question. And I'd like to tell these two friends of mine that their questions are very, very pertinent, but understanding the fact that technology requires resources, and those resources need to be provided in our budgets. And in the budgets, I don't know, private schools may be able to provide those, or they have students who have the devices. But as already said by Mr. Jha, that there is a big, big difference. There is a big, tech divide in the country. There are so many divides, but this one is now becoming more and more,
Prominent.
and prominent. It's difficult to find any answers in the NEP. NEP, ladies and gentlemen, is in your hands. I mean, let's forget, we have very good policies, but we still have a very, very traditional education way of life. And suddenly there has been a miraculous change in the attitude of the teachers, and they've suddenly become technology savvy, understood but from the point of view of the needs of the students. And of course, syllabus is still been, shortened by 30-40%. Hope that so there are no, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not very happy to be able to answer the question on the NEP. NEP model has been implemented, and the how it will take place, whether it will be the same as in the last two education policies, is implement on.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for answering at least in bits and pieces. I think you've given a flavor of the NEP and its applications in terms of hybrid learning. A lot of questions related to how technology platforms are evolving and probably helping education sector. I'll take that to straight away to Shantanu Jha. There's a teacher called Shashank Tanwar. He says, do you foresee more corporate startup tech education players provide home education solution for kids who are undergoing traditional school education? If yes, what impact would it have on the overall education environment? So, you being an edupreneur can probably give us a better view on this.
Could you just repeat the first part of the question? What was it about startups, or was it about what was the phrase in corporate startups?
It was about startups. Let me repeat the question right away. Do you foresee more corporate startups, tech players basically, to provide more home education solutions for kids undergoing traditional education at school?
Yes, absolutely. I think that broadly speaking, we already see the trend at sort of the upper level, that whatever is going on in school, parents are paying large amounts of money for really well-designed content, often presented in a more personalized, perhaps AI-based kind of way. And I think that is simply going to propagate down the economic ladder, and the cost of all of these things is going to go down radically over time. In addition to giving devices to every student, as has been so passionately expounded already, I think the other big missing factor we have overall for these things to spread to a much larger number of schools and a much larger number of students is simply much better internet access. Right. I think this is equally something we need to agitate for in terms of overall investment. There's some really interesting upcoming technologies like Elon Musk's Starlink, which in the next 5 years or so may be able to resolve this problem entirely. Giving the entire country reasonably high quality internet access. But within that context, I'd say, we absolutely are going to see many more startups. They're going to exist in many different ways, right? Some startups are going to focus on content. Maybe they're creating really great augmented reality or VR content. Some startups will focus on the software layer, like we do, trying to create personalized learning AIs that are adapted to the kinds of needs of, say, underprivileged students. Some companies are going to do some mix of these things. Some companies will invent new kinds of hardware to help students. There's going to be just a proliferation of companies doing things at all of these different levels. But the most important substrate behind all of this is simply more students need devices, and more students need some kind of internet access, right? Until that happens, the the diffusion of these processes from the upper middle class, the 4 or 5% who really can afford it, to everyone else it'll be slow, though it will happen.
Right. I have a heap of questions on, I think I'll take it to Mr. Satish Jha directly on teaching effectively for average and below average learners. So this is a different segment altogether that we are addressing to. There's a person called Vinod Jha. He's saying, is online teaching effective for average and below average learners? If yes, how?
Well, it becomes effective as they get used to it. Until they experience it and begin to experience and start working with it, it won't be effective. But the point is online is, it requires a student to have motivation to do that. And it's the function of one's own desire to learn, because no one is guiding you. You are guiding yourself. So a student who wants to learn, as a matter of fact, think of it this way. Today, anything you want to learn at the first level is available to you on the web. Not anything you want to learn. Any question, any information is available to you on the web. If you're curious about it, you can just go and find out. Second thing is how to find out. I found there have been people who have been hiring. They take 3, 4, 5 months learning how to find something out. So unless you try hard enough and you're curious about it, you can't find out. So even if things are given to you on a platter, for instance, if I'm not a cook and all the vegetables and recipes are given to me, can I cook? No, I can't. Even if you have to make a cup of coffee, given the machine has all the possibilities to learn how to do it. In other words, learning how to do that requires a few things. One, that motivation and curiosity about something. But if you're only looking at motivation and curiosity and you have no teacher, then you will be learning in a different way. Teacher helps the process of learning. Without teacher, will take a little longer, probably will learn differently. And in that difference, maybe we'll create something, we'll make things worse. So my point is there will be many kinds of, we are talking about blended and hybrid, these are nice words. Effectively, what we're talking about is we are dealing with a very, diversified world. We will deal with it uniquely as a student, children. Institutions will have to address that differently. Institutions are creating words like hybrid and blended. For a student, for a learner, for a teacher, anyone who's learning, these are part of life. But given the kind of structures we create, that will aid that process. But as a single student learner, it will be a function of curiosity and motivation. That can help them put way ahead of the curve, or they can, as far as they want to go. In other words, even if there is nothing on the planet helping you, you can help yourself. That capability exists. But are you curious? Are you motivated? Are you willing to go to the next stage? So a lot of power has been given to individual by the technology. And that one thing we could recognize. And that's also helping society and the governments to go to the next stage. That's what I would share with you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. There were a lot of questions in this tone itself, I think, for educators and people who are parents themselves. Last set of questions I've picked up for Ma'am Jyoti Arora. This is, what is the benefits and limitations of hybrid learning? How can we overcome these limitations? Hello, Ma'am Jyoti Arora. I think we'll get back to her later. Would any of you'd like to take up this question, please?
Can you repeat the question?
What is the benefits and limitations of the hybrid learning, and how to overcome the limitations?
I think Shantanu or Dr. Chona can be, would like to address that. I could, but I think I've taken a lot of time, so I'll defer to them.
Great. Over to you, Shantanu, please.
Sure. I'd say the biggest limitation that we see is that if you have a hybrid learning model that depends heavily on the quality of the teacher, you're simply introducing a new sort of problem, a new set of inequalities into the situation, right? A hybrid learning model in a village school where the teacher doesn't speak English that well and needs to teach students who need to learn English, is by definition not going to have a great output because the input isn't very good either. Again, those are the sorts of things where I think the answer is actually more technology. Technology is the thing that can be most easily scaled at the highest return on investment and ultimately the lowest cost to be able to really communicate with those students at the level they need, right? It's pretty easy these days to teach a computer to speak English to the student perfectly, right? So even if the teacher can't, if a computer can, that's sort of the natural way to rectify that issue. But I think this is probably the biggest problem India is going to have with the hybrid learning model.
Okay. Ma'am, I'd quickly like to take your view as well.
I think my fear is about commercialization of the package technology. So when they're using a hybrid, when they're hybrid learning, using hybrid learning, and there is in-person. Now, hybrid learning is of many, many kinds, as I said earlier. So if it is both the teacher and the technology, then it really depends upon the quality both of the teacher and the technology. Now, if the technology which is being used for the students is not engaging enough, it's not interesting enough, it's not joyful enough, then the kids are going to switch off their minds. And if the teacher knows exactly how to be able to combine the two, then it would be very. But there are many types of blended teaching that's taking place where they do it online and then they meet the teacher and then in small groups instead of a huge classroom they exchange their views with each other so that the whole thing becomes purposeful and learning actually takes place. But just isolating the two systems, one separate from the other, the two have to be very well connected. One should be more engaging than the other. So it's all a matter of blending it the way you can. You can blend water and milk, make it very thin. You can make it very good. You can have a blended, alcohol. However, the most important thing is how it is presented and what kind of takers do you have. You can't give the wrong medicine you have to give the right thing to the right people. Now, if you take something in very high English to the villagers, they're not going to understand what you're trying to tell them. So I think it's important to be able to engage your technology with the learner at the level the learner is. And the learners in a classroom are at various levels. So the real blending will be when you can outreach or reach out to every learner at the level he or she is, and then keep on increasing the level according to the need of the intelligence, according to the need of the emotional requirement, according to the need of the entire understanding, comprehension, application, etc.
I would say blending like Dr. Chona. I said blending like Dr. Chona.
Yes, very interesting points. Many interesting points raised here. I particularly like the last question because it really gave us a different dimension of thought about the entire topic for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Thank you so much, my dear audience and my gracious panelists. It was wonderful hosting you today. Great session, great learnings, and I'm hopeful that everybody's taken back a few learnings pertaining to technological advancements in the edtech sector. Thank you so much, everyone. With that, we are wrapping up this conversation here. Thank you.
Thank you.